In the OET exam, how can you get the best marks for giving information? When should you give it? What information should you be giving? And how do you prove to the examiner that you're good at it? Check out today's video, OET speaking test. Give yourself more points by giving information. Hi, my name is Richard Foster. Nice to see you again. Some of you may have met me before, but if you haven't, I'm a trainer and assessor for Benchmark Education Solutions. In this video today, we're going to talk about how to get as many points as you can as possible by exercising the skill of giving information. We'll discuss the types of information you might give. We'll discuss when you might give that information, and then we'll also focus on how you can prove to the examiner that you're good at it. Join me now at my computer and we'll show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so here we are at my computer screen again, and we're back to the same role-play card that we've used in the past. So today we're going to talk about the process of giving information. Let's first consider the type of information and when you might give that information, and then finally let's discuss how you might give that information, how you do it, and how you prove to the examiner that you've become really good at it. So let's think about when. When would you give information? When's the first point? Well, actually, the first time is during the introduction. It's when you tell them who you are and what your role's going to be. Hi, my name is Richard Foster. I'm the doctor on duty today. I'd like to help you with in whatever way I can. Do you see what I mean? So you've given information about yourself and why, what your role is in the conversation. Now, the second time when you might give information is when the patient has described their symptoms to you, you now offer a diagnosis. So you're giving information initially as a brief statement of the diagnosis. In this particular role-play card 19, it's the same one we've used on many videos before. In this case, you're giving the diagnosis of croup. Now, the next point at which you would give information is as part of the process of checking the patient's understanding. So this is where you say to the patient, let me ask you, have you heard of croup before? Or do you know what croup is? These are phrases that you can ask the patient just to check the level of their understanding. Now, if they say, no, I've never heard of it, then you can give a little bit more detailed information. If they say something like, yes, I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is, again, give them some information that will clarify what the condition is. Now, a little tip is be really careful with not going into too much detail about about explaining the diagnosis, as this is one of the first times during a role play that a candidate can take up valuable time in going too far with too much of giving information. Now, when's the next stage that you might give information? Well, this might be when you discuss the treatment plan. And there's two parts of this often that where giving information may occur. The first part is where you're perhaps prescribing medication or some form of other treatment. This is where you tell them what the medication is and what it's for, what its intended effect is going to be. In parallel to that, it may not be that you're recommending medication. It may be that you're recommending some form of alternative treatment or a specialist, for example. So you may be suggesting going to a psychiatrist or a physiotherapist or some other specialism. So again, you're giving information as part of the treatment plan. The other part of this is where you are giving advice on how to either behave with the medication in terms of levels of treatment, or how to behave with alternative suggestions. For example, it may be you might advise the patient to exercise in a particular way, or to focus on another aspect of their health. And again, you're giving information, but now it's in the form of advice. In this particular role-play card, you're giving the patient information in the form of advice to avoid if the young child happens to turn blue, then this is a problem and they need to take emergency measures. But again, you're giving information, this time in the form of advice. And finally, the time when you may give advice is when they ask questions. So again, these are kind of random bits of advice that you will give in response to questions that the patient may have. The only other time when you may give advice is more about giving detail. So, for example, you may arrange a follow-up appointment, in which case you've agreed a time and a date. So you've given the patient options as to which time, which date, or you've given them a choice of saying, yes, I'd like to do that, or no, I don't like to do that. So do you see the point? In general, giving information falls largely between the diagnosis and the treatment plan, but there are other times when you can give information. Now, we said earlier, how do we prove to the examiner, or are there options during the conversation where we can prove to the examiner that we've done a good job of giving information? Well, there are two ways. One's a simple one, and one's a kind of a process that you may wish to follow towards the end of the conversation. The first one is simply by, throughout the conversation, checking that the patient has understood and then giving more detail if they haven't understood. But your concern is, have you done a good job of giving information? You can assess that by saying to the patient, perhaps at the end of the conversation, now, Richard, we've covered a lot of information today. Would you mind just summarising your understanding of what we've discussed today? Now, already you're using that process of echoing and summarising, but this time getting the patient to do it for you. And the reason for that, or one of the benefits at least of doing that, is when you say to the patient, would you mind explaining your understanding of what we've discussed, then what you're really asking the patient to prove is a point to the examiner that you've done a good job giving information. Clearly, if the patient is able to repeat it back to you, or to repeat the information you've given them back to you, then you have done a good job. It also means as well that it could be that maybe you didn't give information so well on a particular point, in which case, when you ask the patient to explain their understanding, they may say something like, yes, I think you said this, or I can't remember what the name is of the condition that you mentioned, or I can't remember what you suggested about the medication. Do you see what I mean? So the patient may just seek clarification, and again, you can fill in that gap, and again, you're giving information. So I hope that helps today. That covers pretty much some of the options where giving information is important. We've discussed what you do, how you do it, when you do it, and we've discussed a few variations on how you prove to the examiner that you've done a good job. Hi again. So I hope that makes sense. I hope it was of some value to you today. Today we covered examples surrounding giving information. We covered the type of information that might be given, things like the initial diagnosis, things like detail about the medicine or the drugs that you're going to prescribe, maybe information about referring to a specialist. And then we talked about the various points in time when information might be given. For instance, specific information about medication after explaining the diagnosis, for example. And then when discussing the treatment plan, when answering any questions that the patient might have. And then we discussed how to prove to the examiner that you know these skills and that you're good at it. We discussed how you might obtain information through the use of echoing and summarising, asking open and closed questions, and then checking your own understanding with the patient. Again, great to see you again today. In this video, we really did spend some time trying to explain about information giving. But again, we've mentioned this before, the best way of focusing on the skills you need is to have a one-to-one conversation with me and one of my colleagues. As you know, we offer training and feedback based on our accurate knowledge of what goes on during the OET speaking exam. It's the best way really of spending some time with you in order to figure out any skills deficits that you might have, any areas that you may need to focus on. And this is really all about just maximizing those points during the OET speaking exam. Now, again, it's worth mentioning that as you know, we're regularly adding new videos. But in order for us to be able to continue to do this, we need your help. Would you mind hitting the subscribe button, hit the like button, and in particular, hit the notification bell to make sure that you get all the updates from us about new videos that are being released. So again, I really appreciated the time to speak to you today. Next time, we're going to be speaking about the skill of checking understanding. And that includes your understanding of what the patient is telling you, the patient's understanding of what you've told them, and we'll also discuss the ways it might be done to get the maximum score. Join me in the next video, OET speaking test. If the patient doesn't understand, neither will the examiner. See you next time.